Good morning, everybody. I am very happy to be back teaching. I hope you guys had wonderful weeks this week. I hope it wasn't too crazy of a week for you guys. Just so you know, this is my first COVID online recorded sermon that I've ever done. And so I'm still trying to figure some stuff out. I've done a whole bunch of tests, and I think I've got a whole bunch of my issues figured out with how to run all of these technical recordings and all that stuff. So I hope everything works out well, but if there's ever a time that I'm just kind of awkwardly, blankly staring at you guys, it's probably just because I'm staring at my computer trying to figure something out. And so I apologize for that. Hope nothing like that happens. Also, I've done a whole bunch of replays, and I sound just awful. I sound very weird. And so I apologize in advance for you guys having to listen to my voice for the next half hour or however long this thing goes. Bear with it. I really hope you guys can handle with it, can deal with it. But anyway, the sooner I get going, the sooner you won't have to listen to me. So let's get going. I'm super happy to be back. We're going to be starting the book of Hebrews, and I'm just going to quickly go through a little bit of logistics so that we're all on the same page here. The teaching team has been a little bit expanded, and so we're bigger than we used to be. And what we're doing now is the team has kind of been split up into two teams, and so we have a set of teams teaching each series that we have. So like for the book of Mark, we had a set of teachers, and now for the book of Hebrews, we've got another set of teachers. So just so you guys know, so that you're not caught off guard or anything, I think this has been announced, but I'm just going to officially announce it again. The book of Hebrews, the people teaching is going to be myself, Scott, Andrew, and Nita. So those, us four people, are the people you should be hearing the most from. There probably will be somebody trying out teaching or somebody taking one of our spots or something like that. But for the most part, it's going to be myself, Scott, Andrew, and Nita. So let's jump into Hebrews. About 4 months ago, Pastor Andrew Souter, he told me that the next book that we are planning on going through is going to be the book of Hebrews. And he asked me if I'd be willing to take the next couple of months and study it and teach a context introduction sermon on it. And I said, yep, I would love to do that. And so for the last probably 3 to 4 months, I've been studying the book of Hebrews, listening to different lectures on Hebrews, to sermon series on Hebrews and stuff like that. And excited to finally give it to you guys. So buckle up, get ready. The next half hour of your life is about to be jam-packed full of me spilling the last 4 months of my study out. You guys are going to have no idea what hit you. You guys are going to be the ones blankly staring at your computers in about a half hour saying, what in the world? Just kidding. It's really not going to be that bad. 2-part sermon. I've split it up into 2 parts. The first part is going to be a lot more classroom-like. It's going to be where I go through some of the context of the book. I will go through some of the main themes and some of the history context around like what is happening. And if I'll gauge the room a little bit. If you guys are looking pretty attentive, I might even throw some dates at you. We'll see what happens. And then the second part is going to be a little bit more of a devotional sermon feel. It's going to be basically reframing the question of who is Jesus to you. And it's something that I've been thinking about as I've been studying the book of Hebrews. And I think it's something that for me was very helpful to think about the book of Hebrews and kind of a good introduction to the book of Hebrews for me. So I thought I'd share it with you guys, and hopefully it will be as helpful to you guys as it was to me. If not, and you just get completely lost in the second part of the sermon, you can forget that it happened and just learn about the context. That's completely fine with me. Part one, the context. Welcome to class. Why was Hebrews written? Thanks for asking. I'm glad you asked that specific question, because to answer that question actually means that I will be able to answer a whole bunch of different questions about the book of Hebrews. So you asked a great question right off the bat, and I will tell you about the book of Hebrews. The book of Hebrews was written to a group of Jewish Christians. Remember that, Jewish Christians. That's why it's called the book of Hebrews, the letter to the Hebrews. It was written to Jewish Christians who were going through some extremely difficult times, very, very hard times. The time is somewhere between 65 and 69. That's somewhere where they date the letter of this, or the letter to the Hebrews. And this happened to be, for the most part, one of the worst times in history to be a Christian. It was awful. Let me give you a little bit of stuff that happened. The Roman emperor at that time was a guy by the name of Nero, and Nero was a wacko guy. He was crazy. He like killed his mom, I think, did a whole bunch of like super weird stuff because he was really power hungry, killed a lot of his family members. And a little side hatred that he had was Christians. It wasn't even a side hatred. He just absolutely hated Christians. And he is known as one of the worst emperors to treat the Christians. As far as how he treated Christians, he's just awful. One quick example of that is there was a fire in the city of Rome, and it burned the city for about 5 days, and it destroyed roughly 2/3 of the entire city of Rome. And people were obviously really angry that their city just got burned down. And so they were starting to riot and get angry. And what happened was Nero kind of saw it as an opportunity to direct all of his anger and all the people's anger at Christians. And so what he did was he blamed the fire on Christians. He said, Christians started this fire, and we need to act justice and kill them. And so this sparked a massive amount of killings of Christians. And later on, people suspect that Nero possibly even started the fire. It was kind of a win-win situation for him. He started the fire, is what some people say. It's kind of rumor. I don't know if it actually happened, but he really wanted to build a palace. And there were houses in the way. And so some people would say that he started the fire to clear some land for his palace. And in a win-win situation, he was able to blame it on some people that he hated, which were the Christians, and kill a whole bunch of them, and also have land for a palace then. That's rumor. I don't know. Don't go around spreading the rumor, but it's what some people say about Nero. So basically, politically, it was just a horrible time to be a Christian. Your life was in danger pretty much all of the time from Roman rule. But also, the Jews hated the Christians as well. And here's why. Christians believed that Jesus was the Messiah, the Savior of the world. And the Jewish leaders, however, hated Jesus and eventually caused a series of events that led to his death. And so basically, what the Christians believed was that the Jewish people killed their own savior, the guy who was there to save them from all of their sins and from all of their bondage. They killed. And so you could kind of see how the Jewish leaders and the Jewish people wouldn't have taken that well. And so they didn't like the Christians as well. And now remember, I said that this book was written to Jewish Christians. So you have not only political ostracism and persecution, but you also have, for many people, family who you have rejected in becoming a Christian. And so for them, they were not only facing political persecution, but they were facing severe social and possibly even familial persecution. And they were completely ready to give up. And it makes sense. Their lives were in danger. Their families didn't like them. Their old way of living life, the people who they lived with, their old communities no longer accepted them. And they were ready to give up. They were ready to say, I'm done, I'll go back. And it makes sense. If they would have left Christianity and go worship the emperor, their lives would no longer have been in stake. And if they would have left Christianity and gone back to Judaism and joined their old Jewish tradition, they would have no longer had to worry about their old community and their families kind of rejecting them and sending them away. And so it looked very, very good to just give up Christianity. And the writer of Hebrews, this is why the book was written. The writer of Hebrews, and we really don't know who the writer of Hebrews is, by the way. He is saying, don't you dare give up. He's saying you have right now in your possession, I guess, the only tool and the best tool that can get you through hard times. And he does this with a kind of a series of circular arguments. And the first thing he does is he picks something that the audience or these Jewish Christians have been starting to hold as as something that they can rely on and elevate as something that they can almost worship in a sense. And so what the writer is doing is he picks this thing that people are talking about, that people are ready to follow, and he elevates Jesus as above that thing. He says, you're relying on prophets. Jesus is the ultimate prophet. And then the third part, it's a three-part argument. He says, then gives like a warning or an exhortation or some sort of encouragement. And sometimes all of those happen at once. So he'll be warning you, he'll be scolding you, and he will be encouraging you. Well, not you, but the people that he's writing on. And it seems super strange, and you're kind of like, should I be feeling guilty or encouraged, or what should I do? It kind of feels like a slap in the face that you needed, I guess. That's never happened to me, but it should have happened several times. So it's kind of one of these circular arguments. I have a visual here. I'm going to share my screen if I can, just to kind of help you out with the visual side of this. There we go. So this is a quick picture of kind of the circular argument that he has here. He picks something popular that the people have been beginning to follow. Maybe it's a certain prophet, maybe it's Moses, maybe it's angels. A lot of times this is the thing that he has picked, or that the people have picked. A lot of times they're really good things, but they are beginning to see them as something that can do more for them than Jesus can. And this author is saying, no, Jesus is better. And so why in the world would you be worshiping prophets? Or encourage one another, and you have hope in Jesus because of what he has done for you. And then he goes back and he picks something else, and he just does this over and over and over again. And so he's kind of, in a sense, pleading to these people to hold on to the thing that they have, which is Jesus. Hold on to Jesus, and not turn to the other things that other people might be saying are good or that might seem good, but just hold on to Jesus. Jesus is better than the things that you might think can help you out here. So in summary, the book was written to some Jewish Christians who were facing extremely hard times, just very, very difficult times. And the main theme, if you want one theme for the book, it is this: Jesus is better. This top line right up here. Jesus is better. Whatever it is that you think might help you out in this life, Jesus is better than that. Is it your political leaders? Is it good teachers, even good religious teachers? Is it money? Is it the king? Is it a whole bunch of different things? There's just a lot of different things. Maybe it's modern technology, modern medicine, modern economics, just a whole bunch of stuff. Whatever it is that you might rely on, that you might think might give you success, that might help you make it through hard times in your life, it's not enough. Jesus is better than that. Whatever it is that you are elevating, whatever it is that you think might get you somewhere in life, might save you, it's not going to do it. Jesus is better. Jesus will do it. So just remember, Jesus is better. And that's going to be the main theme that we as teachers go back to over and over again as we teach. And I also would like to say that there's another theme that kind of runs through the whole book as well, that kind of runs under this theme of Jesus as being better. And I want to share this one with you also. So again, the book is written to people going through very hard things, and they're asking, why is life so hard? Why, like, what are we to do with such a hard life? And another theme that the author is trying to push is that life is a journey, and life is a journey with Jesus. And so just think about journeying with Jesus. And after all, I mean, Jesus is better than all these other things. And he does that. He shows that over and over again with this circular argument. But it's this idea of like journeying with Jesus, journey with Jesus. And I like that because it shows that that hard times cannot be defeated through spurts of brilliance and through sprints. It's a marathon. It takes steady reliance, daily reliance on Jesus to get through the hard times that we're going through. And so along with this journeying theme, it can be split up into three, the book of Hebrews can be split up into three different parts that run along the theme of this journeying. The first 4 chapters you can split into a journey with Jesus, the ultimate prophet, into the ultimate rest of God. Chapters 5 through 10 are journey with Jesus, the ultimate priest, into the ultimate presence of God. And then chapters 10 through 13 are journey with Jesus, the ultimate king, into the ultimate city of God. And there is a building, this might seem off topic, but I'll get to it. There's this building in Singapore. I think it's a casino, so I'm not trying to recommend gambling or anything, but there's this really cool building that I think represents these themes running through the book of Hebrews. I have a picture of it here. Yeah, this building. So you can see how it's this weird 3-towered building, and there's like a boat on top of it. I think it's a boat. It's in Singapore. It looks sweet. I'm sure some of you guys have actually been here and seen this place. If so, I'm jealous. But I thought of this building as a good representation. If you want to remember the 2 themes, think of this building. You have this overarching theme that runs across the top, and it connects these 3 buildings. And this theme over here is Jesus is better. And then each of these three towers represents the different types of journeying that we can do with Jesus. So I've got it here kind of written out over top of them. So if you want a quick visual of the book of Hebrews, you can just think of this building and think, oh yeah, the upper part that kind of goes across the whole book is that Jesus is better. And then the three, I guess, pillars that hold that up is the idea of journeying with Jesus and steadily relying on who Jesus is. And I also want to point out the superlative language. I use the word ultimate here, but there are countless different ways in which the book of Hebrews uses superlative language to elevate Jesus. And I'm going to read the first three verses of the first chapter. And I want you to note the superlative language in this. And then also think about the beginning of the formation of this circular argument that I had talked about how you pull something that people are relying on, you elevate Jesus as better than that, as superior than that, and then you give people something to do. So just in the first three verses, you can start to see this kind of this moment or this momentum starting to happen with this circular argument. Starting at verse 1, here we go. Long ago, at many times and in many ways, God spoke to our fathers by the prophets. But in these last days, he has spoken to us by his Son, whom he appointed heir of all things, through whom also he created the world. He is the radiance of the glory of God and the exact imprint of his nature, and he upholds the universe by the word of his power. After making purification for sins, he sat down at the right hand of the majesty on high. So I hope you get to see a little bit of what's happening. He says, long ago, you guys relied on all these prophets that spoke in many different times and in all these different ways. I think the word is polytropos, which kind of, I think about a puzzle. It's many pieces, and you kind of have to work to fit them all together. And what the author of Hebrews is saying is now, in verse 2, but in these last days, he has spoken to us by his Son, Jesus. And then he elevates him, saying he's the exact imprint of God, and that he is upholds the universe by his word. And now he is sitting at the right hand of the majesty on high, and he is now king. And so you should worship him. So I hope you can start to see this circular argument, circular momentum that is starting to happen here. I want to close this first part with a theme verse, and I would encourage you guys, each one of you here, to write it down, print it out, do something, put it on your fridge, put it on your bathroom mirror, do something like that, so that you can remember this verse and just think about this verse. If this is a verse that you can memorize, I think that would be awesome. I think it's a quick, good summary of the book of Hebrews, and it's something that I think we can turn to as a theme verse for the entire book. I just want to give this to you before I jump into the second part. Hebrews chapter 10, starting at verse 23 through 24. Let us hold fast the confession of our hope without wavering, for he who promised is faithful. And let us consider how to stir up one another to love and good works. And I like this verse because it carries that urgency of holding fast to Jesus. Hold fast to who Jesus is. And because you are holding fast, consider now how you can encourage the people around you to do the same thing. Write those verses down, memorize them. It won't take long. It's just a couple words. You should be able to do it. That is the end of my first part of this sermon. And I'm going to try and get out of screen share here see if it works. There we go. All right. Part 2. Again, as I said in part 1, the book of Hebrews is all about Jesus is better, elevating Jesus is better. Jesus is better, so journey with him, okay? And so a question that I think is helpful for us to ask as we embark on this next couple months through Hebrews is to think about who really is Jesus to you? Who is Jesus to you? And I'm going to try to introduce this with a story from the Old Testament, from Zechariah 7. And in order to share this story, I need to give a little bit of context. So the nation of Israel had a golden age, you could say, under the reign of David and Solomon. David was a king who followed God very strongly. He did some weird things that I wouldn't recommend, but for the most part, he followed God. And one of the things he was able to do in his reign is secure the borders and make the nation of Israel a place of peace, a place where people wouldn't have to worry about invading nations and people groups coming in. And because of that peace, Solomon then, David's son, was able to bring a lot of wealth into the kingdom of Israel. And with that wealth, he built a temple. And this temple was magnificent. It was incredible. It was made with the best wood from the area. It was coated with gold from all over the place. Yeah, it was just a beautiful temple. I get angry every time I think about the fact that it doesn't exist anymore, because it was just awesome. It was huge, and it was just meant to inspire awe, and it did. And so after the Golden Age, though, the Golden Age quickly crashed, I guess you could say. The nation split. The northern kingdom went off and followed other gods, and they were eventually obliterated by the Assyrians. And I say obliterated because they were obliterated. We never really hear from them again. The southern kingdom of Judah follows God a little bit better, but not much better. And eventually they are conquered by the Babylonian Empire. And after, I think, 70 years or something like that of being in the nation of Babylon, the Israelites, start to head back to their old land that was taken from them. And this is where this story comes in. This temple was destroyed by the Babylonians, and one of the Israelites goes to the king and says, "Can I rebuild this temple?" And the king says, "Yeah," and he funds the trip, and he sends a whole bunch of people to go build the temple in Jerusalem all over again. And the temple is rebuilt, and in Zechariah 7, someone comes to Zechariah after the temple is built. There's been a party for the temple and everything, and he says, "Look, ever since the temple, the first temple, Solomon's temple, has been destroyed, we have been weeping for the temple. Should we keep weeping for the temple now that it has been rebuilt? Should we keep weeping for it?" And the response in Zechariah is extremely strange, and you might think doesn't really answer the question. And I'm going to read it to you here, if I can find it. Zechariah 7, verse 9. The response to this question, and remember the question is, do we need to keep weeping now that this temple has been rebuilt? And Zechariah says, "Thus says the Lord, render true judgments, show kindness and mercy to one another, don't oppress the widow and the fatherless, the sojourner or the poor, and let none of you devise evil against one another in your heart." What? And you might think that doesn't really answer the question of should we keep mourning. Kind of a yes or no question. Doesn't really require a scolding about justice. But you're right, it didn't really answer the question, but it did kind of flip the question right back at them. You see, the people, this person was asking, essentially, is God ready to come down and live among us again? Is God ready to come to us? Do we need to keep weeping for this? Is God ready to come back? And what Zechariah says is God ready for you? You mean, the question you should be asking is, are you ready for God? Have you made yourselves into the type of community where God can come and where God would delight in dwelling? And I think this is an interesting switch that happens where the people are so focused on themselves and they say, is God ready to come to me? Like, is God ready to come back? And what the prophet Zechariah is saying is, look at yourself. Are you ready? Are you ready for God? C.S. Lewis did this many years later, obviously, in two essays in which he wrote while he was at Oxford. The first essay is God in the Dock. And in that essay, he basically says that modern man has made himself as the judge over God. And he has a quote in it. Well, first of all, he says that ancient men used to approach God or their gods, whoever, how many there were. They would approach them as an accused person, and they would ask for mercy from their God. But C.S. Lewis argues that modern man is now the judge of God. And modern man goes up to God and says, and I'll quote this from C.S. Lewis just so I don't mess it up. Modern man is quite a kind judge to God. If God should have a reasonable defense for being a God who permits war and poverty and disease, then he, the judge, we ourselves, are ready to listen. And the trial might even end in God being released as not guilty. And I like this thinking, or this switch that C.S. Lewis is doing, similar to what Zechariah did in the Bible. He's saying, how are you approaching God? Are you approaching God as the judge? Do you demand explanations from God for the things that happen in your life? Are you asking if God is ready for you? Or are you trying to make yourself ready for God? Just something to think about. The second essay is titled, What Are We to Make of Jesus Christ? And I think this essay fits incredibly well with the book of Hebrews. It is somebody who asks the question, what are we to make of Jesus Christ? And C.S. Lewis, again, flips the question. He kind of thinks, that's a hilarious question. We should be asking, what is Jesus Christ to make of us? And what he does in this essay is he goes through all of the claims that Jesus has in which he claims divinity. A lot of the claims that he says about himself. And he says, so you have these two sides to Jesus. He says you have Jesus, on the one hand, you have Jesus as a great moral teacher who says awesome things, and everybody, regardless of their religion, tends to really like him. But then on the other side, you have claims, and I'm going to quote C.S. Lewis on this because I don't think I would go as far as he does. I think he's using hyperbole. But he says, then you have claims on the other side that if they are not true, they are those of a maniac and a lunatic, compared to which Hitler would look sane and humble. Again, I don't know if I would agree with that. But I think it's hyperbole. And what I think C.S. Lewis is trying to say, and he actually does say this in the essay, is that there is no halfway house with Jesus. You can't put Jesus on a shelf with a whole bunch of other gods and with a whole bunch of other great teachers. You just can't do that. And C.S. Lewis also says that, here I'll quote him. He says, "We may also note in passing that he, Jesus, was never regarded as a mere moral teacher. He did not produce that effect on any of the people who actually met him. He produced mainly three effects: hatred, terror, and adoration. There is no trace of people expressing mild approval of like some of the things he says." So this is something I want us to think about. And C.S. Lewis is, I think, asking us to think the same thing. He's doing exactly what Zechariah did. He's flipping the question. What are we to make of Jesus Christ? Maybe the question is, what is Jesus to make of us? And so I'm going to read the final paragraph of C.S. Lewis's essay, What Are We to Make of Jesus Christ? It's not that long. I'm just going to read the final paragraph, and hopefully you can get a sense of what he's trying to say, and I hope it helps us kind of frame and maybe forces us to think about certain ways in which, just forces us to think about who Jesus really is to us, and which I think is going to be very good for us as we embark on this journey through Hebrews, where somebody is trying to argue over and over again that Jesus is better. Jesus is better. So let's read the final paragraph here. What are we to make of Jesus Christ? There is no question of what we can make of him. It is entirely a question of what he intends to make of us. You must accept or reject the story. The things he says are very different from what any other teacher has to say. Others say, this is the truth about the universe. This is the way you ought to go. But he says, I am the truth. I am the way, and I am the life. No man can reach absolute reality except through me. Try to retain your own life, and you will be inevitably ruined. Give yourself away, and you will be saved. He says, if you are ashamed of me when I call, he says, if you are ashamed of me, if when you hear this call, you turn the other way, I also will look the other way when I come again as God without disguise. If anything, whatever it is keeping you from God and from me, whatever it is, throw it away. If it's your eye, pull it out. If it's your hand, cut it off. If you put yourself first, you will be last. Come to me, everyone who is carrying a heavy, burdensome load, and I will set that right. Your sins, yes, all of them are wiped out. I can do that. I did that. I am rebirth. I am life. Eat me, drink me. I am your food. And finally, do not be afraid. I have overcome the whole universe. I think that's just a powerful essay conclusion, thinking about the claims that Jesus makes and the ultimate reality that Jesus is, and how if we're really going to take Jesus for who he is, we really can't, we either have to fully elevate him above everything else that we have, or we reject him. That's the issue. So I'm going to wrap up here. We are about to embark on a study of the book of Hebrews. And again, I've said this many times, this book is trying to elevate Jesus as better than everything ever, okay? And so the questions that I want us to think about this week are these questions. And there's a lot of them, so brace yourself. Are you ready to follow Jesus completely on his terms? Are you ready to follow Jesus on his terms? And I'm not talking about this as like, are you ready to commit your life to Jesus in this like salvation way? I'm talking about this for you, for every single one of you, regardless of how long you've been a Christian, regardless of even if you're not even a Christian. This is a question that I want you to think about. Are you willing to set aside everything that you think is great, everything that you've already thought about Jesus, and again, turn to Jesus and follow Jesus, or think about who Jesus is on his terms? Are we living in a kind of a shallow halfway house where we kind of pull Jesus off the shelf whenever it's convenient? If some of the things that Jesus says helps our argument, helps our cause, then we can kind of whip Jesus out and quote him a little bit and then put him back on the shelf with all of our books and all of our other religious leaders and everything that we have. Are we living that? Is Jesus our personal assistant? Is he the guy who you just kind of throw the dirty work to, the guy who you expect to support you in whatever you do? Here's another question that kind of goes along with this. Can Jesus offend you? Can God offend you? And I would say, if not, maybe you have made Jesus into like your robot, where he just becomes this robotic part that just supports you in whatever you do. And if Jesus can't offend you, then do you really have a relationship with him? Because relationships, when you rub shoulders with other people, when you live in a community, when you have roommates, when you have spouses, you rub shoulders with them and you run into conflict. And if your relationship with Jesus is one in which Jesus has never offended you and one in which Jesus can't offend you, then my question is, are you really in a relationship with Jesus? Do you really, have you set Jesus to become your little robot who just kind of whips up whatever it is that you might think would be best for you? A relationship requires give, and it requires sacrifice. It requires bending towards the other person. And I want to close with this. Jesus did his part, okay? Jesus did his part. We have a non-negotiable that rubs the shoulders, rubs against, that just really flies in the face of who God is and who Jesus is, and that is our sin. We can't deal with our sin. We are sinful beings. And Jesus did his part. Jesus did his sacrificing and his bending towards us. He died on the cross. He gave everything, the ultimate act of love and sacrifice for you. And he did it for you. And so what I want us to think about is, are we willing to return the favor and at least consider giving everything back to him?